Bob video.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Caroline Roberts with Children at Risk, and I'm delighted to kick off today's Child Safety, Security, and Opportunity Systems Change for the Next Generation Summit. For those new to our work, Children at Risk is a Texas-based nonpartisan research and advocacy nonprofit. We focus on the root causes of child poverty and inequities, and we serve as catalysts for change across research, policy analysis, education, collaboration, and advocacy. We're very, very grateful to our partners who helped make this happen today, our sponsors, the Harvey R. Jr. and Patricia W. Houck Foundation, Trellis Foundation, HEB, and the John G. and Marie Stella Kennedy Memorial Foundation. Huge thank you. Without your support, we can't have amazing learning events like this. In the chat, you'll find links to today's agenda and speaker bios, and we encourage your participation. There will be an open Q&A, so please use that to ask our wonderful panelists and our keynote speaker your questions. A few housekeeping items. This event is being recorded. All registrants will receive slides, shared resources, and the recording link. We'll send you a brief survey afterwards. Really encourage you to fill this survey out. It helps us to continue to hone our events and offer that free programming. And then we have so much great content to share, and we hope that you'll stay just a few minutes past closing remarks to get that content. Reminder, please ask questions and use that Q&A function throughout. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Bob Sanborn, President and CEO of Children at Risk.
All right. Thank you very much, Caroline. Hey, I want to thank everyone who planned this. I want to welcome everyone, but I want to thank Caroline and Shannon and Bree and the whole team at Children at Risk who've worked so hard to make sure that this event goes off without a hitch. This is a particularly interesting subject for us, right? Because Children at Risk has worked in this area really sort of at the seeds at the beginning of some of these things, especially human trafficking 20 years ago. We learned about it, and we were one of the first groups to really talk about this. But we really care here in Texas, Texans in general, care about those that are being exploited by trafficking. We also care about our vibrant economy and keeping it as a vibrant economy. So today we're looking at the intersection of both of those things, two things that are precious to Texans. Both of those things need a lot of help. So we're talking about opportunity youth, young adults, young people within the range of 16 to 24 who are neither in school or working. And this population really faces these unique risk factors that make them vulnerable to exploitation, to human trafficking, but more importantly, they make them vulnerable to a not so bright future. As we look at what we're talking about today, I just want to talk about some of the data. 13% of all Texas youth, 16 to 24, are neither in school or working, making them vulnerable. 50% of young people ages 20 to 24 do not have any post-secondary education. Again, we hear sometimes how college isn't for everyone, but it's very important. If people are going to be part of the workforce, if people are going to make sure that their salaries are higher down the road, they're going to have some type of post-secondary education. Here's another important statistic. 16% of these very young people are parents. Indeed, Texas is 8th in the nation when it comes to teen pregnancy. And some areas of our state, the Valley, Dallas, Houston, are first in the country in terms of second teen births. And so this becomes a problem as well. Rural counties, sometimes we think, well, this must be a city problem. Rural counties have a youth disconnection rate of about 17%. So this is double what suburban youth and still significantly higher than a lot of youth in urban centers. So this is problematic for us. Here's one of the real key things for us. Whenever poverty hits hard, young people are more likely to become victims of trafficking and exploitation. And oftentimes in Texas and across the nation, we don't make that connection. The other connection we don't make is that kids that are coming out of the system are especially at risk. So according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, up to half of child sex trafficking victims have spent time in the foster care system. So when we're talking sometimes about trafficking, we often think that ending human trafficking is a simple black and white solution. Go after the traffickers, stop trafficking at our borders, and once young girls and boys are rescued, the hard part is done. All of those are myths that really don't hold up to the evidence. Poverty, children in the system, especially kids in and aging out of the foster care system, make up the bulk of trafficking victims. And if and when they're able to exit a trafficked environment, we don't have a safety net in Texas to help meet their basic needs. And this becomes a key problem because if those needs aren't met, they return and they have no choice but to return to that life of sexual exploitation. In 2019, Caroline, myself, some other staff members at Children at Risk, we did a trip around the world with some of our donors focused on solutions in other countries to what human trafficking is doing. So we went to the Philippines, we went to India, we went to Ethiopia, Hungary, big centers for human trafficking. And we often find that we think that because of American and Texas exceptionalism, we must be doing all the right things here. But what we found is that in other countries, they're doing everything possible, sort of at that far end, that sort of when they're rescued, what are we going to do? What are we going to do around a safety net? And they were all doing them better than what we're doing in the United States. So there are solutions out there. Sometimes we're just not focused on them. For years, Texas has been a national leader in addressing human trafficking and really focusing on opportunity youth. But one of the things that's happened is that we recently hosted this focus group, a number of focus groups across the state, to hear from human trafficking survivors, to hear and talk about opportunity youth and the organizations that serve them, and how agencies could best serve these populations. Today, we're going to hear from participants and systems change experts on how community and survivors' voice can translate into concrete policy changes. But in almost every interview that we've done, people have said that they need help meeting those basic needs so that they get back on their feet and into a sustainable career. And we see over and over again that survivors of trafficking want independence. They need to be able to help to meet these basic needs first so they can begin working towards a career. So while we've been on the forefront, we're not necessarily on the forefront of making sure that this safety net really is intact for our children. The next legislative session is going to be a tough one. I think we're going to hear a lot about we need to cut back on things because the budget is tight. And yes, there's more oil revenue, but what's happening is that across the country, we see the federal government really cutting a lot of things that used to go to state, a lot of the funding that used to go to the state. So there is a lot of pressure on our budget. Moreover, the pressure is all in the safety net area. It's it's going to be a very tight, we're playing defense on this. And so it's going to be really important for advocates, for the community to really speak up, and for the general public, right, on both sides of the political aisle to say, hey, we really want a vibrant economy, and we also want to end trafficking. These are all sort of key things that are going to be important. These young people, these children, are really the future of our state. They are the future of our state. They're the future of our workforce. They're the future of our economy. And so today I'm very excited to really bring all of this together, to talk about solutions, to talk about where we're going. But it's important that we pay attention to this because it's important for us. And Caroline, you ready to continue this conversation?
Absolutely. Ready and excited. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to transition over to our keynote speaker, Dr. Monique Miles, Vice President of the Aspen Institute, Managing Director of the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions, and Director of the Opportunity Youth Forum. So excited to have you today, and I'm going to give you as much time as possible.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you, Bob. Next slide, please. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Before we talk about systems, before we talk about policy, before we talk about data, I'd like to begin someplace much more familiar. I want to start with each of you, the participants. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and think about one adult who changed the trajectory of your life. And it wasn't because they had perfect credentials or a perfect program. It was simply because they saw you and they supported you to belong and ultimately to thrive. Maybe it was a teacher, a coach, a grandparent, a pastor. Hold that person in your mind and in your heart and now. Because we're gathered together virtually, I want to ask you, because the chat feature is not enabled, but just imagine that you were able to share out loud the type of person it was. And specifically, what I'm asking you to share is to explain what made that person unforgettable. What is the one word you would choose? Now, as that word is coming to you, I imagine that you are thinking of words like kind, consistent, patient, hopeful, loved. What's interesting, if we were able to see these words pop up in the chat right now, I am 100% certain no one would type workforce focused, juvenile justice knowledge, behavioral health oriented, or knowledgeable about education policy. Because before any of us ever needed a system, we needed a human hand and a heart to guide us on our journey into adulthood. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I think that's one of the most important truths we can remember as we begin our conversation today. Because while organizations experience systems, young people experience relationships. And while agencies organize issues into categories, young people experience life. And life doesn't arrive neatly organized into departments or issue areas. It arrives all at once with intersectional complexity. Next slide, please. Now, with that truth in mind, I want to bring a young person on this journey with us today. You see, a few years ago, there was a young woman in Texas named Deasia Wiggins. Like far too many young people across our country, Deasia was navigating experiences that no young person should ever have to navigate. She experienced foster care and she survived trafficking. She knew what it felt like to move through systems that were designed to protect children, yet often required children to navigate those systems alone. If we met Deasia during that chapter of her life, many of us may have introduced her using the language of our professions: a foster youth, a traffic survivor, an opportunity youth, a justice-involved young person. But here's what I've learned after spending more than 2 decades walking alongside young people. Young people never introduce themselves or define themselves in those ways. Those are our categories, not theirs. Today, Deasia is studying political science. She works full-time providing therapeutic services to young people, and she contributes to national policy conversations about preventing sexual exploitation. Most importantly, today she hopes to transform foster care so that the next generation has a different experience than she had. What changed? Next slide, please. Deasia's life didn't change because someone finally found the perfect program. It changed because somewhere along the way, someone asked a different question. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" they asked a truly transformative question. It was, "What gifts do you have that the rest of the world needs?" You see, I've come to believe that every great movement for justice, for opportunity, begins when we stop defining people by what they have survived and begin investing in who they can become. Next slide, please. My name is Dr. Monique Miles, and it is an incredible honor to be here with you all today. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President of the Aspen Institute and Director of the Opportunity Forum. Every single day, I work alongside communities across the United States, including extraordinary partners throughout the state of Texas who are asking a simple but profound question: what would it take for every young person to matter and to be supported to thrive? Through the Opportunity Forum, we've had the privilege of supporting more than 40 urban, rural, and indigenous communities across the United States that are working together to reconnect young people to education, employment, purpose, and civic life. Here in Texas, that work comes alive through the Texas Opportunity Youth Network. And what inspires me most isn't simply the innovation that's happening across Amarillo, Corpus Christi, Dallas, El Paso, Houston, the Rio Grande Valley, or San Antonio, or any communities across the state. It is the way those communities are proving something that research alone can never achieve. And it is that when adults work together across sectors and systems on behalf of and in partnership with young people working together, it is possible to transform the future. Next slide, please. So today, I would like to invite us to consider one idea that has fundamentally changed how I understand leadership, systems, and most importantly, young people. And it is this: young people do not experience systems or individual challenges. They experience life. They experience whether they are safe, whether they belong, whether anyone expects them to show up, whether they can imagine a future, and whether someone believes in their gifts, their talents, and their purpose, especially since trafficking doesn't happen inside one single system. Neither does foster care or juvenile justice or homelessness. As every practitioner in this Zoom knows, life doesn't arrive one issue at a time. Once again, it arrives all at once, and that means our challenge today is larger than improving one individual system. Next slide, please. Our challenge is to build communities where every young person experiences something stronger than any system alone could ever provide: belonging on the path to thriving. And here's what I want you all to know: belonging is not simply a feeling. Belonging is infrastructure. And when we build communities that support public systems to collaborate and work in concert on behalf of young people, the results are that young people know that they are seen, understood, needed, and loved, and every dream becomes possible. So with this promise in mind, let's begin by understanding the scope of the opportunity before us. Who are the Opportunity Youth in Texas? What are they experiencing? And what might become possible if we designed every system to intersect around the universal needs of every young person rather than the boundaries of our institutions? What can we achieve when we begin to collaboratively work by asking, what is it that every young person needs in order to know that they matter and are supported to thrive? And not just Opportunity Youth, every young person. Because while our systems divide young people into categories, life experience does not. Next slide, please. And after more than 20 years of walking alongside young people and listening to their stories, including learning from communities across this country and studying systems change, I have come to believe that every young person deserves 6 things, 6 human-centered experiences. To begin, every young person deserves safety. And we all know safety is not merely the absence of violence, it is the presence of people who make you feel protected. Because a young person can leave an unsafe neighborhood and still not feel safe. A young person can leave foster care and still not feel secure. Safety begins when every young person knows, I don't have to survive alone today. Next, every young person deserves belonging. And belonging is not simply being invited into a room. Belonging is being loved before you've earned it. Belonging is not a feeling. It is an experience created by relationships, and relationships are the infrastructure upon which every other outcome is built. In other words, belonging happens at both the structural level and the individual, deeply heartfelt level. Also, and this is critical for our young people, every young person deserves healing. See, so many of our young people we serve have experienced trauma. To be human is to experience the ups and downs in life. But trauma should never become their identity or their only story, because our young people are not broken. The systems that are meant to serve them are not connected or coordinated in the ways that address the complexity and intersectional nature of the issues they experience. And without healing, every system, every person, every young adult eventually reaches their limit. Also, Every young person deserves opportunity. And I don't simply mean access, I mean real opportunity, including high quality education, meaningful work, access to reliable transportation, affordable housing, quality healthcare, mental health support, and the opportunity to dream because dreaming is what nourishes our souls and compels us to action. Next, every young person deserves to find their purpose. And to be clear, purpose is different from employment. Employment pays the bills, but purpose gives people a reason to aspire and to keep going. We actually know from our research, young people who find their purpose live longer. They communicate that their lives have more meaning and are more fulfilling. And when you ask an opportunity youth about their dreams, they talk about the vision that they hold for the future, dreams of entrepreneurship, community leadership, and future world building. See, young people don't simply want jobs. Once again, they want meaningful lives. And finally, every young person deserves to have their voice heard and to experience agency, a sense of agency. One of the greatest mistakes we adults sometimes make is designing systems for young people without young people at the center of problem identification and solution design. Because sometimes we forget that young people are experts of their own lives and are adept at identifying barriers. Their lived experience is not anecdotal, it is the curriculum. In the most effective communities I've seen, they know this and therefore do not merely serve young people, they govern alongside them. Taken together, if these 6 needs matter for every young person, then they matter even more for young people whose lives intersect multiple systems. They matter significantly for our opportunity youth. Next slide, please. With this truth in mind, I want to invite you all to think back to our Deasia. She didn't wake up one morning and say, "Today I'm interacting with the foster care system, and tomorrow I'll engage Health and Human Services." No, she woke up asking the same questions every young person asks. Am I safe? Does anyone care about me? Who can I trust? How can I achieve the future that I imagine for myself? And if they are a parent, how can I achieve this future for myself and my babies? And those questions are never organized by agency or held within one system, which means our answers do not reside within one system. Next slide, please. The good news is that Texas is already showing us what is possible when communities come together across systems and sectors to meet the needs of opportunity youth. And Texas communities are making meaningful, notable progress, y'all. So, for example, in Amarillo, leaders raised the profile of opportunity youth in the Panhandle through 2 opportunity youth summits hosted by Amarillo Area Foundation. In Central Texas, what began as a single county collaboration has grown into a 7-county alliance united around one goal, expanding opportunity for young people. By partnering with Austin Community College, local leaders successfully advocated for Fluggersville ISD to become an in-district partner, making tuition-free college a reality for many young people, including opportunity youth from communities with high rates of poverty. In Corpus Christi, local leaders have reimagined what coordinated support can look like through the Elevate 361 Re-Engagement Center. It is a true one-stop shop hub where education, workforce, and justice partners work together every day to help young people reconnect to opportunity. And in just 2 years, the center has served more than 750 opportunity youth while pioneering partnerships with specialty courts to provide intensive support for justice-involved youth, including alternatives to incarceration. In Dallas, the Dallas and Tarrant County Opportunity Youth Coalition launched the nation's first specialized re-engagement center, the HYPE Center, proving that when communities replace stigma with dignity and coordinate support around justice-involved young people, reentry becomes more than a return. It becomes a pathway to opportunity, purpose, and belonging. In El Paso, local leaders are demonstrating what's possible when an entire community commits to young people's success. Through innovative initiatives like Big Futures, more than 2,100 opportunity youth, including justice-involved, homeless youth, housing insecure, young adults have reconnected to critical services and new opportunities. This work is coordinated through the Breakthrough 915 Opportunity Youth Coalition and backboned by the University of Texas at El Paso. And because the city manager recognized that opportunity doesn't keep office hours, El Paso made the bold decision to staff Center Future 7 days a week. It is the only re-engagement center in the nation to do so. Think about that for a moment. Hope doesn't keep office hours. Young people certainly don't keep office hours, and neither should opportunity. Moving on to Houston, regional leaders recognized that if they were going to design systems around young people, then first they must understand the realities of their lives. Therefore, they commissioned a comprehensive 13-county opportunity youth landscape analysis to better understand where young people live, what barriers they face, and how those barriers differ across communities. Armed with that knowledge, the Greater Houston Opportunity Youth Collaborative became one of the nation's pilot sites for scaling youth outcomes, working with communities across the country to accelerate reconnection to education, employment, and critical supports. In Jasper, one of Texas's long-standing regional partnerships between school districts and community colleges, demonstrates what's possible by connecting career and technical education to the region's high-demand, high-wage industries. And this matters because Jasper has created pathways that help young people see a future for themselves close to home in the community they love. They don't have to leave home to achieve their dreams. And in Lufkin, leaders are laying the foundation for the next chapter of Opportunity Youth work in East Texas. While coalition building is still in its early stages, organizations like the Legacy Institute for Financial Empowerment and Stubblefield are already bringing partners together around a shared vision. It's to expand apprenticeships, strengthen pathways back to high school, and create more opportunities for young people to reconnect to education and work. And in the Rio Grande Valley, leaders continue to set the standard both in Texas and at the national level. Everybody is watching as Rio Grande Valley helps older youth and young adults complete high school. Through the Possible Dream Adult Charter, the region has created innovative pathways for young people who have become disconnected from education. What began in the city of Pharr has now expanded into rural communities where deep trust with school districts and strong community partnerships are helping young people reconnect to school, earn diplomas, and rediscover what's possible for their lives. And finally, in San Antonio, which is the birthplace of Texas's Re-Engagement Center model, the Next Level Opportunity Center has become a national example of cross-sector partnership, serving more than 1,500 opportunity youth and young adults, many facing housing insecurity while working to earn a high school diploma or a GED. What I want to say in summation is that these are different communities, different politics, different geographies, but the same lesson. Communities thrive when institutions stop asking, whose job is this? And begin asking, whose child is this? That question changes everything. Next slide, please. The Texas Opportunity Youth Network's Innovation Fund, it tells the same story. More than 5,000 young people have reconnected to education, employment, and critical supports through local innovation. But here's what's especially captured my attention, and I want you all to know. It isn't simply that young people found jobs or completed credentials. That is important, yes. It's the fact that so many became leaders in their own communities. Think about that. Young people who were once described by what happened to them are now helping to shape what happens next in their communities. This isn't just a successful program, it is democracy in action with young people at the center. And that brings me to one final insight from my research. Next slide, please. During my doctoral work, I studied one question: how do communities create lasting system change? I discovered that narrative is infrastructure. You see, the stories we tell shapes the systems we build. If we tell stories that define young people by their deficits, then we build systems that manage deficits. On the contrary, if we tell stories that recognize their gifts, then we build systems that cultivate human potential. You see, every generation inherits stories and then decides whether to repeat them or to rewrite them. And friends, Texas is rewriting the story. And not because every challenge has been solved, not because every system is working. We heard Bob's opening. It is because communities across the state are refusing to let a young person's hardest chapter become the defining story of their life. The question before us is no longer whether we know what young people need. We've always known what they need. The question is whether we have the courage to build systems and tell stories that are worthy of them. So, where do we go from here? Let's begin with building communities where every young person knows they matter, where every young person is supported to thrive. Because when a young person believes they matter, they imagine a different future. And when they imagine a different future, they begin investing in it. And when enough young people begin investing in their future, communities transform on their own. And that is how system change happens. One relationship at a time, one community at a time, one story at a time. And I am deeply encouraged because Texas is already showing us what is possible. As we know, Children at Risk has helped to move important policy conversations forward, from increasing transparency in workforce investments for Opportunity Youth to elevating Opportunity Youth as a priority population to strengthening collaboration across agencies whose decisions shape young people's lives. The current focus on improving coordination, sharing data effectively, and building stronger interagency leadership recognizes an essential truth. Young people deserve systems that work together because, once again, their lives are not divided into a single issue. Next slide, please. That work matters because policy is not legislation. Friends, policy is love organized at scale. Every transportation decision is a belonging decision. Every housing decision is a safety decision. Every workforce decision is a purpose decision. Every education decision is an opportunity decision. And every single budget is a moral document because it tells us whose future we believe is worth investing in. Next slide, please. So today, I want to close by offering you 3 invitations. The first is to become translators. Many of you spend your days walking alongside young people. You hear stories that legislators never hear. You witness barriers that dashboards can never capture. You understand realities that spreadsheets cannot explain. Translate what you witness into policies because every law that has ever transformed this country began with someone telling the truth about what they experienced. My second invitation is to become bridge builders. The young people we serve do not wake up thinking, today I need a better workforce system. They wake up wondering, can I get to work if I don't have transportation? Or can I stay in school if I don't have housing? Young people live interconnected lives, and our system should learn to do the same. The future belongs to communities that collaborate faster than problems compound. And finally, my third invitation is to become possibility builders. One of the greatest gifts we can offer a young person is not simply a service. It is our imagination and willingness to see something in them before or whether they can see it in themselves. Because every young person deserves at least one caring adult who refuses to let their hardest chapter become the defining story of their lives. And now I want to close by going back to where we started. Remember, I asked you to think about one adult who changed your life. What if someone in the audience in the Zoom today becomes that person for the next Deasia? The truth is, most of us cannot change the lives of 500,000 Opportunity Youth, but every single one of us can change the life of one young person. And here's the remarkable thing. Communities are not transformed all at once. They are transformed one relationship at a time, one young person at a time, one courageous act at a time. Last slide, please. Finally, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Every child deserves to wake up believing I matter, I belong, and my future is worth investing in. If we build communities where every young person can say those 3 things, then education, healing, employment, leadership, and a more inclusive and just democracy that works for everyone becomes possible. And not because we changed one system, but because together, across the many systems that touch young people, we change the story about who they are and who they can become. Thank you. Caroline, I turn this back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miles. I cannot imagine a better presentation to really ground us in this work and why it matters. So grateful to you for leading us off that way. Please don't forget to drop questions in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll take a few minutes to circle back. Our next panel will explore how community voices can shape stronger systems and more effective policy, bringing together leaders from human trafficking, workforce development, and opportunity youth initiatives. This conversation will highlight what we're hearing directly from young people, their families, and the people who serve them, the barriers communities continue to face, and how those experiences can meaningfully inform systems change. We will examine how collaboration across sectors translates into lived experience, into lasting systems change. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Shannon Epner, project coordinator at Children at Risk, along with our panelists, Dr. Haesung Han, co-founder and chief clinical innovation and strategic projects at Poetic, Stephanie Pienta, director of the Opportunity Youth Initiatives with United Way of San Antonio and Bexar County, and Felita Villarreal, president and CEO at Vita Careers. Thank you so much. And Shannon, take it away.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And thank you, Dr. Miles, for that incredible keynote. I'm feeling very inspired from everything that you've been able to share with us, and grateful to be able to translate that now into our panel and to be able to have this conversation with these amazing ladies today. And today we're going to be talking about translating community voice into action. And our panel brings a wealth of knowledge and experience across issue areas and geographies. So we're going to jump right in. I'd love to start with the question for our panel. And I think, Haesung, we'll start with you first. Can you briefly describe your work and the communities you serve? And what is an issue that's affecting youth and young adults that we need to be elevating and talking about more?
Thank you so much for having me. I am Haesung Han. I am a clinical psychologist. I'm a board certified art therapist, and I have the privilege of co-founding Poetic with Jennifer Tinker. We started the organization in 2017, and what we do is we build a pipeline out of juvenile justice and into community care for young people impacted by abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. And we do that by providing therapy with 24/7 support, case management, advocacy, educational support, art therapy, and career development. And we have youth spending up to 32 hours a week with us, all under one roof at no cost. And Poetic was created after my time working at Dallas County Juvenile Department, because we really wanted to provide the best practice aftercare model to stop the revolving door to child victimization. So what we see at Poetic is truly a mental health crisis with a very clear starting point. Most of the girls we serve have a history of childhood sexual abuse, and all of them have a history of running away from home. And that is what is often pulling them into the juvenile justice system in the first place. So by the time they reach us, 71% have a history of substance use, 51% have a history of self-harm and suicidal ideation, and half have a history of psychiatric hospitalization. And just pulling the data this year alone, we have seen an alarming trend. Youth referred to us have a higher rate of substance use, exposure to domestic violence, and exploitation via social media apps than any year prior. So as troubling as all of this is, the one issue that I would raise that deserves a lot more attention locally and nationally is digital grooming and exploitation. So we know that social media is not new. But what is new and what has changed is the algorithms that keeps our kids scrolling for longer. And on the other side are adults with interest in children, and they are being fed children through the same algorithm. And so As mind-boggling as all of this is, at Poetic, we really wanted to take a closer look at the scope of the issue. So we launched a digital and relational vulnerability index. So this is a questionnaire for youth, and it looks at their current vulnerability and exposure to online grooming and manipulation. And what we found so far is that youth are being exposed to unwanted contact. They are explicitly being asked for pictures and videos of themselves, and they are navigating a digital world on their own. And we as parents truly are in the dark. And we know in child abuse literature, the greatest protective factor is having a trusted adult that you can turn to. And what we're seeing based on our youth's own report is that they're dealing with unwanted, unsafe contact alone. So there is a huge gap and a huge opportunity for skills-based education and parent involvement. And that's precisely what we're working on at Poetic to fill that gap.
That's absolutely incredible. And it's alarming as well, as you said, that what we are seeing for our youth. And I think I really want to elevate to this navigating this world alone. So they're navigating the digital world on their own, and probably as well, they're navigating our real world alone as well. And so I think as we're talking through this as well, I'd love to hear from our other panelists. Stephanie, I would love to hear what are you seeing in San Antonio? What are the issues that are affecting your kids? How are they navigating their world?
Thank you, Shannon. Again, I'm Stephanie Pienta, and I serve as the Director of Opportunity Youth Initiatives with United Way of San Antonio and Bexar County. And of course, my work focuses on reconnecting young people between 16 and 24. But before this, I spent over a decade in public education as a truancy officer, an at-risk coordinator, and attendance officer. So I've seen challenges on both sides, and what I think for our work, what I think deserves more attention is the preventative side of our work. Middle school is where we see the first signs that a young person is at risk of disconnection. So we invest earlier in our middle schools and we focus on prevention before intervention in high school. We're not just reconnecting more young people, we're preventing many from disconnecting in the first place.
That's absolutely correct. And I have been in that middle school setting for a long time as well. And you see it happening earlier and earlier. You see all of our youth, and not just San Antonio as well. I want to elevate. I think we see it across multiple communities. But Felita, what are you seeing in the Valley? What are you hearing about? What's the issue that's affecting your youth?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Felida Villarreal. I currently serve as president and CEO of Vida. Vida is a regional nonprofit organization that has been serving the Rio Grande Valley for over the last 30 years. The RGV is, of course, one of the poorest regions in the nation. And what our organization does is help low-income young adults access career pathways in high demand occupations. And we do that through a variety of ways. We provide financial assistance to cover things like their tuition costs, textbooks, but we go beyond that as well to help them address the barriers like transportation, like childcare, like emergency needs. And in addition to that, we combine that with an intensive case management model, which includes career counseling on a weekly basis. It includes professional development workshops on a monthly basis, making sure that our young adults not only have equitable access to technical training, but that they are also being guided into the soft skills that are so essential in today's, growing economy and workforce. And one issue that we see deserves more attention, I would say, is at the intersection of workforce development and family stability for young adults. We see, young adults particularly from 18 to 24-year-olds who are parents who are working multiple jobs and also trying to access education all simultaneously while navigating systems that are not necessarily supporting them. And so they're not our traditional students, they're not our traditional workers. these are young adults who often have to choose between paying rent or finishing their certification. And so we've seen how oftentimes the systems treat workforce development, childcare, housing, and education as separate issues. But for the young people that we're serving, these are not separate issues. They're all happening at once. And until we continue to strengthen and continue building integrated support systems that address the whole person, we'll continue to lose talented young adults who have the drive, but not the infrastructure to succeed.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the work that you do around that intersection and that space to support your clients and those in your community as well. So we have so many people on our webinar today who are working with nonprofits in schools, healthcare, government. They represent all the systems and agencies that your clients and our youth intersect with or interact with. What is one thing that these folks can do this year to better elevate the community voice, and things that they are seeing as well? What do you all see? And I'll open it to whoever wants to go first.
I can go. And I don't know about kind of this year, but I think just in general, I think it's really important to believe survivors, believe children. Too often, especially in our work, we look at a behavior, running away, an arrest, an assault charge, and we treat that as the whole story. And there's so much more underneath it. Every girl at Poetic has a history of running away. Most have a history of childhood sexual abuse. And when we're looking at adverse childhood experiences, on average, they have 6 out of the possible 10. So the story underneath it all is survival. They're running away from abuse. They're protecting themselves from harm. And we rely way too much on the juvenile justice system to respond to that. And I can say that having been inside of it. And what we really, collectively need to do is to support them right at the start and believe them the first time that they make an outcry.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we've heard that. I know Poetic serves girls specifically. We're hearing it as well from our providers that serve boys specifically, that we are not believing the stories at the onset. We're not hearing the stories at the onset. So really, when our youth come to us, how do we take what they are saying and believe it and really make it into something that's actionable?
Yeah, and I think it's important because it's so easy to kind of just take the snapshot of behavior and see that and put a label. And I think coming from the space of psychology, it's really understanding the reasons why, and kind of the community, the family underneath it all. And there's always a trend. There's always kind of like this thread that goes throughout a child's life. And really at the start is how can we best support families first and foremost? And in our experience, we know that parents are really doing the very best that they can. So how can we really provide the level of support and resources that they need early on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie and Felita, what else? What are the other things our communities can be doing, our nonprofits, our government? What do you think that we can do to better elevate community voice as well?
I think for one, asking our community what is working. Oftentimes, I know we may approach communities from a deficit lens on, identifying what's broken, what's missing, or what's failing. But a lot of times, our communities have already solutions in place, and we have support networks, cultural practices, survival strategies that have been keeping our families and our residents afloat for generations. And so, like, for example, at Vida, our model was built by listening to participants and putting them at the core of our services so that they can let us know where their barriers are and meet them where they are. And that's how we've learned that through career counseling and case managers who understand, their story is more effective than just giving a scholarship or a handout without any follow-up. And so that's how we've learned on how to improve outcomes, which is that tailored support system that encompasses not just financial aid, not just access to education, but wraparound support systems that cover things like transportation, emergency needs, childcare, and a lot more. And so I think going into communities as learners and asking, what is working, what resources should we continue to invest in, and where are there opportunities to scale existing programs that have demonstrated impact.
I love that you guys are talking with your clients and really, I love that you're thinking about like there are solutions that have worked for generations. There are solutions that may have been working already. They might be disrupted because of agencies or systems that are changing, but we know that there are things that work. And having someone else come in and say, well, actually, you should be doing it this way, isn't necessarily the solution. We need to really talk to our communities.
I think another something else that we can do to better elevate the community voice, especially with young people. And I know we are in places and nonprofits and organizations where funding is a challenge right now, but paying young people for their expertise, especially young people with lived experience, because we're asking you to sit on advisory boards, tell very painful stories, and help shape our programs. But too often we're asking them to volunteer. And so if we truly believe that their voice matters, we need to value them the same way we value consultants, because they ultimately, that's what they're doing for us is consulting. And so just as importantly, closing the feedback gap. We can't just ask young people what they think. We need to show them that their input changed a policy or a process or a budget, because nothing is going to build trust faster with them than seeing their voice become action. And we can help them do that.
Absolutely. And that actually kind of leads me to our next question. So we know we all have stories. We've got banks of stories and we have youth who want to engage in this work. What has helped you all turn these stories into policy change? You each have worked in different areas of policy work, and whether it's been through focus groups or working with local level or state levels, what has helped you take these stories and change these systems, change policy?
I would say one story definitely is powerful. The stories create empathy, but our data is what creates credibility. And so, one powerful story gets a lot of attention, but hundreds of stories that are supported by data and backed by cross-sector partnerships, that's what can help change policies. And so when change happens, that change happens when community members, nonprofits, our schools, our businesses, our workforce, government entities, when we all start to work together and put that data together, I think that's really what has been the most helpful. So, there's anecdotal conversations that they start those conversations, but I think that's the data and the evidence that actually changes those systems.
Absolutely. It backs it up to say, yes, this may have happened to this one youth, but here we've got data that says it's happening to another 1,000 youth over here. And their stories might differ a little bit, but they're all having that same experience.
Yeah. When I think about the idea of like what is required for true change in legislation, 100%, like Stephanie had said, it really is kind of the culmination of people's stories, and I also often think of like, I wish that there was more that we can do. So when I think about that, if I would love like this idea of like, what if running away from home was actually treated as a sign that the family needs support instead of a sign that the child needs punishment, and it's really sad because right now when a girl runs, especially if it's repeated and she's classified as a child in need of supervision, she's the one who potentially ends up before a judge and not the family that she ran from. So what I've loved to see is like if we're serious about addressing youth vulnerability from the start, it has to be a different first response. So if she runs away the first time, we know that it's really difficult within CPS and the foster care system, but what else is there, right? What organizations and agencies can join together, go into that home and understand what the family actually needs before it becomes a case built around the child's behavior. And, to take it kind of more online, the same question belongs there. A child being groomed digitally, often like she might or he might pull away first, guard their phone, get quiet about who they're talking to. And right now, we're asking that child to notice those changes within themselves by themselves on platforms that are built to keep them there longer by design. And to be clear, algorithms are doing the heavy lifting for adults with interest in children. And there is very little obligation for them to prioritize child safety at all. So I would love for us to start to shift away from punishing the child and, removing it outside of what does it look like within the context of juvenile justice, removing her from her home where she holds a burden of being the identified patient, that she's the one that needs to be changed. Where, like, as adults and as a society, we're really not doing enough to create a safe and, equitable environment for our children in reality and digitally. And I think that's something that we really need to examine. And I think, to Stephanie's point, more stories, more cases where harms are really happening. And what can we do as a society, as the adults, to make that change happen?
Yes, absolutely. It is. We see too often that youth are removed from their homes when maybe the home actually is the support system that they need. There's more that is going on underneath the surface, and that we really do need to look at what is that root cause, because like running away is the greatest example. Running away is just a symptom of what is going on, what is actually happening. So I know we are going to come up on time here very quickly, and I wish we could keep talking for so much more. We have a lot of really great questions in the chat before I get to our last question. And so there have been a couple questions to Stephanie about how do you connect with middle school? How are you all in San Antonio connecting with the middle schools?
So that's tough. And Shannon, I know you and I have talked about how hard it is to get those reports from the districts, because districts can be very territorial for all the right reasons. When families are going through things, they don't want to necessarily share all of that information with outside entities. And so United Way has built a reputation in San Antonio and Bexar County with our school districts, where we are there to provide support through our initiatives. And so there was a lot of building trust, a lot of meeting with district staff to build these data sharing agreements, and going into partnership through MOUs, and letting them know the deliverable is that we are going to help you do your home visits. We're going to help you meet with the families, meet them where they're at. If they're having issues with chronic absenteeism, that's usually where it starts in middle school. So we're looking at the youth in middle school that are missing 2-3 weeks at a time. And like Dr. Hahn said, that's kind of a first red flag that something else is happening in the home. And if trafficking is happening, attendance is where you're going to see it first. So it's not necessarily that we're looking at a lot of youth completely disconnecting and stopping out in middle school, but the chronic absences in middle school can lead them to leaving in 9th or 10th grade, and then you're now moving into intervention without any prevention at a younger age. So it really is about working with your school districts and offering support. I think school districts sometimes look at it and ask, why do you want that information? And it really is about telling them, we really are here to support the community as a whole. And wraparound support is very important with Opportunity Youth, but it starts long before they turn 16.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Stephanie. I know we have some more questions in the chat. We'll do one more and then we'll ask our panelists to answer the questions separately in the chat. But one question that is coming up about research that is shared in every legislative session, we see it ignored. So we see data that is ignored. So any concrete tactics that you have seen that help to shift lawmakers from skepticism into action? Anything that you've seen there?
I don't think research alone is really going to kind of, propel a person to change or change their minds. There has to be humanity, there has to be survivor story, survivor led. And I think that and combined with the wealth of research that we do have, where it's true data, true numbers of what's happening in real time can be effective. But I do agree, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I wish there was a silver bullet that we could say, like, this is this one data source that we know everyone will believe, and we're just not, the skepticism is too much right now. It's too much. So with that, we just have one time for one question for each of you. I want to end on a hopeful note. I want to make sure that we are ending in a good space. What is one reason you are optimistic about the future of kids and young adults in Texas? It's giving you hope. Stephanie, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think just the youth themselves, because, they are much more resilient than we think they are. Oftentimes we hear them say that they don't need to be rescued, they just need help. They don't need to be told what to do with their lives, they just need help doing those things with their lives. And so I think it's the youth that I work with, the youth that we all work with that give us hope. Um, and what also gives me hope is that more organizations like ours are willing to collaborate instead of compete. Because when we combine forces with our brilliance, all of our lived experiences of our young people, I genuinely believe this is how we build systems that are more responsive and we're more equitable and they're more human. And, I recognize that with the three of us on the panel, we are in that I-35 corridor. And so, we have someone from Rio Grande, someone from San Antonio, and someone from Dallas that we can really start to work together to connect. And so my hope is that once a child or youth leaves from one area of Texas and they go to another, that they're not completely restarting their connections. And that gives me hope.
I love it.
Agreed. I don't think I could say it any better, Stephanie. I think you said everything perfectly. And I think it is like if you're face to face with an incredibly resilient youth that despite everything that they've endured, that they keep on fighting, they fight through wanting to get their high school diploma, getting a career, seeing their therapist every day, working on themselves, building a network of support around them. Like, I mean, that in itself is so incredibly inspiring. And I'm inspired to be on this panel, to work with fellow NGOs, really doing the work. And we are relentless to make sure that we end youth vulnerability. So it's an honor.
I agree as well. I think the resilience and the innovation happening at the community level every single day is a great reason for optimism. And like was said before, despite the fear, despite uncertainty, despite these complex systems, our young adults across Texas, across the Rio Grande, are showing up. They're pursuing careers, education, while they're navigating all sorts of barriers and challenges and supporting families. And so, that resilience is an inspiration for everyone. And, in addition to that, being able to see more leaders and more stakeholders in the nonprofit space, in government, in healthcare and education who are willing to do more work in building systems that serve these young adults better and who are wanting to ask those better questions and wanting to listen more and wanting to invest in what actually works and investing in evidence-based solutions.
Thank you so much. And yes, to all of it, double click down on all of it. I very much appreciate the conversation with this panel today. I know we have questions in the chat that we have not gotten to yet. And so our panelists will still be on for the rest of the webinar. And so I ask that you all take a look at those questions. Some are specific to Poetic, some are specific to the Valley. So take a look at those and see what you can do. I'm going to pass it back to Caroline. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a fantastic panel. Really, really appreciate your time and expertise. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Crystal Gomez to update us on some federal policy and how we might be thinking about some current clients or incoming clients. Crystal, take it away.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm in Oklahoma, and so if my Wi-Fi is not great, if it starts skipping, let me know, and I'll turn off my camera and hope that that helps. But I did want to give an update to folks. So some big developments have happened within the last month. On July 31st, a contract that the federal government has through Health and Human Services to provide legal representation to children, unaccompanied children in immigration detention proceedings ends. And the organizations that serve those communities, those folks, those kids, are not going to seek to renew that contract because they have not been paid by Health and Human Services since December. And it sounds like the Health and Human Services and DHS are asking for confidential client information in order to make those payments. And so they're having a conflict. And there are plans in place, it seems like, and there's been Texas Tribune reporting on this, to move the nation's unaccompanied children population to Texas and to have the contract for their representation in immigration proceedings run through the state of Texas. And in particular, run through the state of Texas with an agency that doesn't have any experience with criminal defense, with immigration legal services, civil immigration. They are just a criminal defense organization. So we have a lot of concerns about what this means. Texas facilities that hold unaccompanied children are not licensed through the state of Texas. So there is no independent inspection of how these kids are held within the state. It's really the people who are holding them that are inspecting themselves. And these are all children. The legal representation that they receive is through child trafficking protections in place that Congress had provided for to ensure that these kids, we had an adult who cared about them, who had their best interest at heart, reviewing whether or not they had been trafficked or whether removing them back to their home country would lead to them being trafficked. The last thing we need is to take these kids who are in our care and send them back to people who were exploiting them. So we don't know that there will be those trusted adults in Texas after July 31st and who that's going to be and how long it's going to take before they have that representation. And it's really something to keep an eye on because I do think it impacts how many kids might end up in scary situations who are within our state lines. And so that's just one update. We will be trying to do some kind of advocacy to get groups who have child welfare at front of mind and who care about anti-trafficking to please let their voice be heard, that these kids need that protection, that these protections exist for a reason, and that Texas and Texans don't want weakening of anti-trafficking laws. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you. And any questions for Crystal, just a reminder to drop those in the chat and we can work on answering those. Thank you so much for that very important update. So we're going to dive into our next panel discussion, what creating systems looks like in practice and what is at stake for opportunity youth and trafficked youth in the next 90th legislative session. I am joined by some great panelists, Jason Sabo, founder of Frontera Strategy, Courtney Chavez, director of the Opportunity Youth Initiatives, and Andrea Sparks, director of Government and Strategic Relations. So we're going to switch over here now into some panel questions. And we're really focusing on taking what we learned from our community voice panel and everything that's been said today, and how does that translate into legislation, agency, policy reform, and other types of this broader systems change. So to get us started, can each of you briefly introduce yourself and then describe your work?
You want to go first?
Who wants to go first? I'll jump in. I'll be first. Hi all. So first, thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate the panel and conversation so far. It's always refreshing to be in a space where we're starting to recognize that silos shouldn't be the way we operate. Kids don't live in silos, they don't experience life in silos, and so our systems shouldn't operate that way. So, hi everyone, I'm Courtney Chavez. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Government Relations at Lone Star Justice Alliance. And so we have dual opportunity here where my primary focus and work is in advocacy, both at the state capitol, but also local governments, to understand and help support the building of partnerships that cross private and public entities. So how do we connect government entities? How do we connect nonprofits and community voice, as well as private industry, to answer a lot of these questions together? But also my organization runs an Opportunity Youth Network in Central Texas. So we run the Central Texas Youth Alliance, which helps inform a lot of our work. And so that's the core of where we operate to ensure that all of our kids are getting opportunities to succeed in life.
I'll jump in. Hi, all. Andrea Sparks. I'm Director of Government and Strategic Relations at Buckner International, which is a 148-year-old organization based in Texas, but serving children, families, youth, and aging seniors in Texas, as well as Africa and Latin America. And I come from a career of child protection and anti-child exploitation work. Moved to Buckner about 4 years ago to move upstream and try to prevent some of those harms. But I also run a small nonprofit called Not on Our Watch, which is focused on engaging community leaders to educate and advocate for protection of children from online exploitation and harm. So delighted to be with y'all here today, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Jason Sabo with Frontera Strategy. I'm based in Austin. I've worked as a contract lobbyist for Children at Risk and a bunch of other nonprofits, Children at Risk specifically, for about 15 years, working on the human trafficking portfolio, and a few years ago with a bigger and bigger focus on the Opportunity Youth work. I'm really excited to talk to folks. It was, really gratifying to hear the last panel. I know that I was taking some notes, and then Ms. Villarreal talking about outcomes and the importance of ensuring that we have concrete outcomes, and Ms. Pienta talking about this idea of the importance of an interdisciplinary approach. A lot of the stuff that we'll talk about today that has been effective and advancing both human trafficking and, more recently, Opportunity Youth legislation at the Capitol. I think that there's a lot of potential, and I think that in many ways, from a political perspective, we're just getting rolling right now.
Completely agree. So building off of last panel and our keynote, what advice would you give today's attendees on how to get involved in policy work?
Well, I'm always a proponent of don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Go talk to your legislators now, often, and in their districts. Build those relationships with them. They now, during the interim, have more time, right? They're drinking from a fire hose during the session. Now they're home, they have more time, they want to hear from their constituents. So I've always had success in advocacy for youth when youth come along, right? Or when I go along with them. And it's building those relationships and getting them to understand the perspective of folks in their districts, specifically the youth. Always, always, always for Texas, there's a layer of how is this good for business? How does this save us money? And you have to be able to, give those kinds of outcomes too. But it's the stories that stick with people. It's the personal experiences that they either have on their own or that you create for them. So we spend a lot of time at Buckner having legislators visit our sites, meet with the folks that we serve, get to know them, hear their stories. And it's those stories that I then hear them talking about at the Capitol. Yeah, you don't have to have a high-powered lobbyist. You don't have to be even very articulate, and you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know all the facts and all the data. You know your story, and you're prepared and you're respectful to everyone, because you never know, that person you meet at the Capitol who you think is just the intern, that person is setting the agenda for that member. Just go often, relate, and go in the district.
So I'll add a little bit from my perspective, which is yes. And if you don't know the organizations in your areas that are doing this type of work, I strongly encourage you to ask, find out, start to understand where they are in their work and see how you can connect directly at the local level, because that will also give you some advice, education, guidance on how to engage both with your representatives at that local, state, or with your state level folks. And so a lot of us are doing this work in areas around Texas where we can give advice. We can make it a little bit easier for you to approach if you're nervous about it or you just need guidance. And so we're here for that as well.
I guess for me, it's a yes and yes and. And it's one thing that I think is overwhelms a lot of us when we do this kind of work, and I've seen it happen a lot over the years, is, I mean, think about the people on the call right now, the 130 odd participants, the diversity of interest, the diversity of needs, the number of state agencies that are impacted, the number of local governmental entities that are impacted, the number of federal grants that are or are not coming in, that should be or should not be coming in. I mean, it's just so super complicated, right? And you get lost in this sea of complex policy and you don't know where to start. And I think that folks on the call today, kind of this idea that we always hear from people at the Capitol, like, oh, we need to hear from the community voice. Yeah. And then you guys would go up there and, as we see in the chat, you get ignored and it totally sucks. And I mean, I don't blame people for being frustrated by the system, because the system is designed to be frustrating. And I think that quite often when we go to the Capitol, and especially in an upcoming session like this with money concerns and whatnot that are looming, if we come in and we want everything, we get nothing. And what I urge people to think about going into this session in particular, but in any legislative context, local or state legislative or even federal, is be super focused. I mean, be very, 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 very hyper specific on one or two things, and then hammer those one or two things. You don't have to blow up the entire rock of policy that you are concerned about or want to change. All you got to do is find that little tiny hairline crack. And then you'll have Caroline Roberts and Mandy Kimball and Andrea Sparks and Courtney Chavez and all these other people at the Capitol, and everybody on this call hammering a chisel into that little crack. That's how we win. If we try to blow up the whole rock, the rock crushes us. If we attack the rock differently, we can beat it.
Thank you, guys. Just a yes and. I was looking up the number of bills filed for the last 3 sessions, and the number of bills is just going up exponentially every session. So if we think about, kind of the attention economy, what makes you stand out? It's the stories, and it's being focused, and you've got to you're competing against so many bills. It's got to be memorable. So from your perspective, what is most at stake for Opportunity Youth and youth vulnerable to trafficking this session? What are you worried about, maybe wanting to defend or move the ball on?
I'll
Jason, go
start.
ahead.
One thing that I would say is the thing that always concerns me about moments like we're in right now for opportunity youth and for trafficking isn't so much the challenges ahead of us as the potential for opportunities lost. Every 10, 12 years, the legislature in the state reviews how every single state agency functions, for example. This is called the sunset process. Agencies that are extremely important to the lives of opportunity youth, extremely important to the lives of victims of human trafficking are being discussed and debated right now, with particularly the Texas Workforce Commission being front-loaded in the conversation because a lot of these other agencies are big and complicated and they're still trying to figure out where they're going to go with them. So there's a process right now that really is the legislature opening up the hood of government and letting the public, and to a sense more so than normal, kind of get in there and mess around with things. If we don't get in there now, the getting in was going to be gone, because in the next couple of sessions, they're going to be like, well, we just did that. So the worry that I have going into next session is that we have this incredible opportunity in front of us and we're going to blow it. We're not going to maximize it for its biggest potential. And I give Children at Risk a ton of credit. I mean, I think Caroline and her team and Shannon, everybody had a conversation about Sunset literally the day after last session ended. I mean, literally. So this is something that we all need to be paying attention to because it's really important. And check out the Children at Risk website because they've got great resources on Sunset there.
So I'll jump in, and I think it was Andrea earlier saying you're a recovering lawyer. I'm a recovering lawyer, which means I look at everything from a risk averse standpoint of like, what? So but a lot of things scare me as I walk into the space. But I do try to shift to opportunity, very similar to what Jason's saying. I think what I'm monitoring as we go into the 90th is a lot about narrative, especially because our work is fundamentally focused on juvenile justice. So a lot of our kids who are impacted by juvenile justice concepts and what that narrative looks like for them and how that's going to change programming or funding resources, especially in a fiscally conservative environment where I think it was yesterday, day before that, word came down of a 3% budget cut across state agencies. So what does that look like, and which programs do we need to protect to ensure that we don't lose progress or momentum? Because Texas is actually, we've done some really great things in that space, and we have opportunity to now jump and move forward. And so what do we do to protect that momentum? What do we do to ensure that what's working doesn't change? What do we do to ensure that the data that's showing it's working is getting to the right folks in the right hands so that we can prove those points and then continue that progress forward? And so that's my primary as I'm walking into the space. It's always appropriations money and how do we ensure that we keep building and growing?
Yeah, yes. Sunset is a great opportunity, and I feel like this Sunset staff has been super responsive and interested and following up and asking more questions. It's been amazing to go through that process. I'm looking forward to seeing those reports. I feel like also what's at stake, especially now that we're back in budget cut time instead of post-COVID money time, is the legislature is going to have to make some tough choices, as always. And with the 3% cut across the board to agencies, it's going to get even worse. And I feel like there is this narrative that has started in the past couple sessions about unhoused youth or juvenile justice youth being different, being those people, being inherently bad. And I think we've got to get youth to go talk to their legislators in the district to show, no, I'm in your district, I'm your neighbor, I'm your constituent. I'm not just that youth. And I'm a human being. And, and I think it's okay in this legislature to say, I'm a child of God, just like you. And so I feel like there is what's at stake is that it's going to be easy to kind of dismiss a certain population, a lot of the youth that we're talking about, as, we're not going to be able to help them. There's not enough money. We've already spent a lot of money on, state hospitals. So that's what I worry about. And that's why I think it's really important that we start telling those stories, success stories too, especially right now.
That's such a great point. That it's the success and it's the resilience. Opportunity youth and trafficking touch on education, workforce, child welfare, juvenile justice, just name the system, behavioral health, housing. I loved how Dr. Miles pointed out that that's not how children experience systems, right? They don't wake up and say, I need to call HHS today. But the fact that these youth are moving through all of these issues and systems that intersect, where do you see the biggest opportunity for coordination?
I would say all of the above, of course, all of the above. But right now, I feel like, especially when Texas touts itself as number one as business in business, um, and there's such a focus on business in Texas and workforce, and we can't have strong business if we don't have a good workforce. I think we have to leverage what is put before us, right? And so that to me seems like a really good opportunity with the governor starting this Texas Job Council in March and then coming out with these directives recently that are more about helping youth and others who, are struggling find pathways through apprenticeships and through, more streamlined services. I think, TDLR, Courtney Arbor is doing an excellent job. She's got some things lined up for former foster youth. I think that is an opportunity. And I was thinking about this in preparing when Dr. Hahn was talking about youth who are trafficked. We had a tendency to just, and I say we in the anti-trafficking community, when I was at the governor's office, looking at, okay, they need counseling, they need, a place to go, they need to have all their needs met. And I'm telling you, youth told us over and over again, and we started finally listening, what they really need is a sense of agency. They really need a sense of purpose. They really need a sense of identity that their traffickers take away from them. And I got to tell you, having a career and a job is part of that. And we see it like when youth can get out of a trafficking situation and find another way and find their purpose or an identity, even if it's a meaningful job, that is such a big thing for their resilience, for their healing, for their identity. And so I think there's something there. There's also a quote by the previous speaker, trauma should never be their identity, right? So finding a way for youth to figure out what they want in life and then starting the path toward that, even as they're working through their trauma. We don't have to wait. We don't have to put them in a place and then wait for 2 years. They're ready. And they told us that over and over again. And I think that is a good opportunity for us to leverage.
One thing that I would add to that is, and I really appreciate Andrea's comment about workforce, and I do think that there's an analogy to be made between some of the work that we've been doing, and we've seen movement politically around childcare. Childcare and youth development are always one of those things that the business community loves to support because there's this nebulous outcome 30 years down the road where kids become productive workers and the economy's better. That language for business has changed. In the course of the last couple of years, there's an immediacy there. They're not looking for public investments in childcare or youth promoting employment services for an outcome that's 20 years in the future. They can't get people to show up at their jobs tomorrow. So there's a new kind of urgency and immediacy that we're seeing. And somebody asked in one of the Q&A questions at the outset, just kind of question about framing. And how do we frame this stuff for legislators who aren't necessarily down with this kind of stuff, who particularly as was noted in the question, when the services being discussed are disproportionately for youth of color. I said the old white guy. I mean, that's obviously the elephant in the room, if anything we're talking about here, and it's one worth acknowledging, I think. But when we're thinking about the framing right now, and as response to the question that was just asked about that, I mean, for me, what we saw last session when we were talking about the workforce development boards and how their state plans didn't include a word about Opportunity Youth, even though they had federal funding to spend on these kids and all these other things. We framed it not as, about services for kids, to be entirely honest. We framed it about how do you increase the transparency and accountability of publicly funded systems. I don't care if you're super conservative or super liberal, you're going to agree that publicly funded systems should be most efficient and effective as possible, regardless of what they're doing. But in this case, they happen to be doing something good, right? So it's even more important, I would argue. So, when you're thinking about how to talk about these issues, remember the context in which you're having that conversation, the people with whom you're having that conversation, and kind of think of it through the lens of their priorities. And you think about the bills that we were able to move the last couple of sessions. This has all been very bipartisan on these very important issues. You look at like the last session, two Democrats carried the Opportunity Youth bill. It was Senator Blanco's bill, sponsored by, then Representative James Talarico, no longer in the legislature. He's got another thing going on. And then, you've got the foster care and juvenile justice kind of human trafficking screening bill, which was Angela Paxton and Sophronia Thompson, the most bipartisan weird combo you could possibly imagine, really, but beautifully so. And I think that when we're talking about these issues, it's incumbent upon us to come to the legislature kind of with a recognition of where they are and figure out where the commonality is, so that ultimately everybody can come out a winner, both from a policy and a political perspective.
That's what, so yes, completely agree on all points. I'm going to come out of left field on this one, which is I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle, and looking at age groups as the biggest opportunity. That the question of the cross-cutting of agencies and how many different agencies might touch one child for different reasons is immense. And we heard stories about resilience of our children who figured out how to keep coming back. It shouldn't be that hard for our kids. And so what I am encouraging, what I'm hopeful, what I see opportunity for is if we focused on an age group of 16 to 17-year-olds in particular, because that is our group of kids who have significant struggle. They're not quite ready for workforce, but we want to get them there. They may be aging out of DFPS or housing opportunities, so they're couch surfing. They may be have food instability, no places to go, and their vulnerability risks go up. And so if we had agencies look at that age group in particular of how they're navigating who's in control of that child, like who did that child report to, what is happening to that child, and then creating a process that makes sense from a data share perspective and all the pieces you need to ensure that that child has what they need. I think that's a huge opportunity, and then feeds right into everything that Andrea and Jason are talking about for workforce, because now you're preparing them in real time and short term for those big needs.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's where, interagency councils, ombudsmen, so bringing together a group or a person that spans several different agencies, but is focused on one population and is actually the owner of those outcomes is very needed. Where do you see the greatest opportunity for next session? We kind of covered this. And then you can also include an action that you recommend that everyone take over the next 6 months.
I'll jump in and start here and say, so I'm going to look at it as like a policy watch of what we're following, which is a lot of conversation around youth violence and also preventative measures. And so community violence intervention programming and spaces like that. So what does that look like? How do we expand it on a statewide level? What does the funding look like to support a community structure and infrastructure to start to catch more kids who are experiencing violence in communities sooner, or give them the resources they need? We have great examples in communities in Texas already that we can leverage as evidence of support, and really lean into that as we keep going. I think what I would ask of people over the next 6 months is to understand a bit more of the data that's coming out that's working. And especially around this conversation and narrative that we're talking about youth violence, what's working, because that narrative needs to be shouted from the rooftops. It needs to be pushed. It needs to be reminded. And so that we can ensure that the positive work that's being done will keep moving forward, because negative conversations are happening. And that needs to be interrupted as much as we can with what's true and evidential. Evidential. It's a morning.
I would add, look at what's happening federally and in the state. And there's a lot. And then yet there's not much happening federally, but leveraging that, right? We've got Alex Adams and the Trump administration who's doing some pretty bold things and talking about, making foster care as good as it can be, but also keeping more kids out of foster care. We've, talking about home visiting, about substance abuse treatment for young moms. And a lot of our opportunity youth are parents. I mean, they're and sometimes single parents who just need a lot of help. I would look at the governor's office, not just because he's my former employer, but the child sex trafficking team and the sexual assault survivors task force is doing incredible work. And they are open to hear from folks about that work, right? So multidisciplinary teams, care coordination teams, really wrapping around victims of trafficking and exploitation, of sexual assault. There's a lot going on there. And so I think those are all good opportunities. I think there's finally a push, and I think, depending on the budget cuts, whether we can get this done, but for supervised independent living, that rate was not ever changed with the other rates in foster care. And so there's kind of a understanding that really needs to expand and keep up with what kids actually need. We see a lot of kids in our supervised independent living who are trying to get in, who are community kids. And we are fortunate Buckner raises private funds to do that, but there's a lot of community kids who need that service. And they might not be aging out of foster care, but they may have been in care at some point, or they're coming out of really tough situations. And maybe aren't, our foster care system has changed a lot. We've really narrowed that funnel of who gets removed and into foster care. So I think we need to leverage what's going on. The FYI vouchers, which was, a Melania Trump thing. Like, now we have those, and let's get them out there. And, there's a big push. And there was a hearing on this a couple weeks ago to provide funding to help navigate those vouchers for youth, because it's really difficult to get into housing even with a voucher. So I think we need to build upon what we have. And I think there are some opportunities to do that.
And I just to add on the idea of building on where we are, you look at what legislation that passed last session, for example, that Blanco bill that increases the accountability and transparency of the local workforce development boards with regards to some of these services. There's no reason we couldn't be doing something like that at the state level as well for the entirety of what the state's bringing in from the federal government for things like the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act. And I would also, every once you could kind of see an issue, sort of a groundswell building over the course of several sessions. And one thing I think that people kind of should know is that when we're talking about these issues, particularly around opportunity youth, over the course of the last, and with that kind of broad frame, Caroline can attest to this. People had no idea what the hell we were talking about 5 years ago. I mean, literally. And, we'd have to sit back and, okay, why these kids? Why this? Why that? And I think this kind of the larger, culture, American culture has shifted in the last 5 years to this recognition that it's hard making that transition from young adulthood to adulthood. For anybody, regardless of how well-resourced your family might be or your situation, how great your situation might be. So I think that there's something in the political zeitgeist, right, that we can tap into, and we were seeing it last session. And that's another one of those things that worries me, that there's an opportunity right now. There's an opportunity within the Borg of the system itself at the Texas Capitol to advance these issues because of coincidental processes stuff, right? But there's also, at the very same kind of moment, this articulation of a priority and an urgency, which doesn't always happen that way. And, that we just have to figure out how to sync those two things up.
Thank you guys. That was also a hopeful note to end on. And I am very excited about this next session, excited about all of the potential for change, as well as gearing up for any kind of challenges that we might have to face, which I know we will together. Thank you to all of our incredible moderators and panelists. We're going to wind down this event now. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experiences, your perspectives, and your insights into how to meaningfully change systems. It's just been an incredible group of people, and I feel so inspired to move forward. Throughout today's conversation, we've heard about the importance of breaking down silos, strengthening collaboration across sectors, creating systems that better support these vulnerable youth. And really, it's all about working together, is what I heard over and over and over again. Building relationships and working together. This is just the beginning. We encourage you to stay engaged by continuing these conversations within your communities. We've dropped a lot of resources in the chat, but we will also follow up with sharing out these resources after we close today's event. And we want to leave you with one final call to action. We've heard a consistent message from our community partners. The people closest to the challenges often have the best ideas for solutions. Your experiences, successes, and challenges are critical to shaping better policy. We are launching our Community Stories and Advocacy Forum today to help collect some of those voices from across the state. And we invite all of you advocates, service providers, educators, youth, those with lived experience. Please share your stories and help us to understand what's working, what's not working, and what policymakers need to hear. We are not the experts. We are not the ones that are boots on the ground or those with lived experience who are the experts. So it is so helpful for us to be able to work with you to make sure that policy is informed by you directly. And as we've said, these are the stories that actually are remembered. They are the stories that move policy forward. Data tells us what's happening. Stories help us explain it and why it matters. Thank you for the work you do every day and for trusting us to help elevate your voice. We'd also like to extend a sincere thanks to our partners and sponsors who made today's summit possible. Again, I'd like to thank the Harvey R. Jr. and Patricia W. Houck Foundation, Trellis Foundation, HEB, and the John G. and Maria Stella Kennedy Memorial Foundation. We really, really appreciate your support. If you found today's program impactful, please take a moment to complete our survey and sign up for our newsletter to hear about more events like this. And we look forward to continuing this work together. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And you can find that survey in the chat.